Hi there. This is Kathy with the Rock Your Retirement Show, and I have an important announcement. We'll be taking a sabbatical until January 2020. If you'd like to stay in touch, head on over to rockyourretirement.com/community and join our Facebook group. I'll be keeping in touch for the rest of the year in the Facebook group. In the meantime, you can go back to the episodes that you missed and catch up. But until January 2020, we'll be on hold. So I'll see you then on the Rock Your Retirement Show. Bye. This next episode came from the vault of episode 109, where Steve Cousins, a Rock Your Retirement listener, talks about how working and volunteering helped him feel useful in retirement. Enjoy!
The advice I'd have for people in their careers, if they're still working, is to don't just do your job. Don't just do that one thing that is your prime center, but get outside of your comfort zone. Widen your horizons and to meet people. To be on any kind of local civic committee, some kind of a emergency fire department thing, whatever. I just volunteered for everything, and I got to know people. And yeah, it was a little extra work, but it made work more fun too.
Welcome to the Rock Your Retirement Show. It's Kathy, and I'm here with Steve Cousins. Steve is actually a listener to the show, and so he knows about Mr. Grant. And Mr. Grant you hear him now, so he was quiet all day. And then right before I got Steve here for the interview, he started just being a naughty little bird. So if you hear that in the background, I apologize, but there's really nothing I can do about it right now. So Steve is actually retired now. He graduated from college. He went to work for an oil company, and he worked there as an engineer. My husband's an engineer, so I kind of have the advantage of working with engineers. And then eventually he became the vice president and general manager. He stayed with the same company for his entire career. How often does that happen? I mean, never. And then in 2016, he retired when he turned 60. And then he started doing things part-time. And he started also volunteering. And so we're going to talk to him a little bit about that because he's a real live listener and he's here to help you determine what you want to do when you retire. So Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kathy. I have that effect on birds, I want you to know.
Do you have a bird as well?
Actually, no. We've got a cat and two dogs.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully he'll be quiet. You know, it's funny because my bird, whose name is Mr. Grant, is actually in a soundproof, fairly large room. He's in a 6x8 by 4 foot cage. And he's in this, I don't know what you call it. It's like it's like a 12-foot. It's a small room. Like it couldn't be a bedroom, but it's called our technology center. So regular people in our neighborhood actually use that to put all their equipment in, and we use it to house my bird. And then we soundproofed it. So you can imagine how loud he is if you can hear him through that soundproofing. He's very loud. I am jealous of that room. It would make a perfect podcasting studio.
Well, you might have to move the bird.
Well, he's been with me since 1990 and they live to be 85. So it's probably going to be a while. But if you're listening to this podcast and you're a bird expert and you'd like to add a bird to your flock, please reach out to me at podcast@rockyourretirement.com. Okay, so back to you. So what made you realize when you retired that you didn't want to just go cold turkey and just stop working? What made you realize that?
Well, there were several things. I had always thought I would work until I was 70 or later because I had a lot of fun at work. I really enjoyed what I did. But then it changed. And the last couple of years, I did not enjoy it very much. But I hung on because, frankly, I was scared of retiring. I had several fears.
What you were afraid of? Yeah.
Well, I'd always heard that you shouldn't run away from something. So you had to run towards something. And that made sense to me. And if I was just leaving work because I didn't enjoy it anymore, that didn't mean that I was necessarily going to enjoy retirement either.
You know that you are wise beyond your years.
Well, actually, I picked that up from your podcasts and some others that I started listening to when I started to ponder the whole concept. There were some other problems. One is, and I know it's crass and it makes me sound vain or petty, but I had kind of looked at the compensation I got as a way of keeping score through my career. And I was right at the point where I was making more money than I had ever made. And it was kind of painful to think about walking away from, when I finally was making what seemed like an outrageous amount of money, to just turn my back and walk away. It seemed non-frugal, or I don't know. It seemed like I'd worked really hard to get to that point and to just walk away because I didn't need it anymore. Right. So that kept me for a while. And then probably the main reason was that my job was my whole identity. We're in a small southern state, and my company had been there for 100 years, basically. Everyone knew it. It used to have a retail location on every corner. And I was the face of the company. I was the guy on TV, and I was the person that the governor knew and the other business leaders knew and the Chamber of Commerce knew. And I enjoyed that notoriety. And I thought of myself as this guy that represents the company. And I really had a fear that if that left, that there might not be anything else in me. I might not have any substance.
That happens, Steve. I mean, people leave their job and then all of a sudden people aren't returning their phone calls. So did that happen to you, or do your part-time jobs sort of keep you in that prestigious area? What happened?
Well, I saw it happen to other people, and I just didn't want to go there. So I never really took a day off. The last week of my employment, I announced a couple of months ahead of time I was leaving. But as it got close to the end, I set up my first two side gigs, which were basically representing most of the other big business leaders in the state as my clients in a couple of trade associations. And I did that because I knew I could stay in touch with the same people. I would still be working with the governor. I would still be working with the agency heads and the senators and the legislators. And it just kind of happened. I was very lucky that the need for that job appeared at the same time, or very much providential, blessed maybe.
So did you create these associations, or did you step in? Like, how did it happen?
Well, I had helped found them 30 years previously, and I was our company's representative on their boards. Because a couple of the board members had very flexible jobs, they could donate sometimes 20 or 30 hours a week to running the groups. We got by without any kind of paid director. Well, again, coincidence or luck or providence, both of those guys left for retirement and health reasons right about the time that I decided to retire. And so a new opening was there. I convinced the rest of the group that they weren't going to be stable and they wouldn't even function without a paid director, and that they wouldn't find anyone that knew more about it than me, since I helped found groups. And that's worked.
See?
I just stepped right into it.
So you used your contacts that you made while you were working to create a whole new part-time job for after you retired.
Very much. And I had that in the back of my mind for years. All the side gigs that I've got now are carryovers from things that I volunteered to learn how to do at work that didn't really enhance my career at work very much, but that I knew would be there someday if I chose to retire.
That's great. Okay, so, and this was what, currently, it was approximately a year ago, is that correct?
Year and a half.
About a year and a half ago.
January of 2016.
Okay, so you went directly from working into the side gigs, or was there a break somewhere?
There really wasn't any break. I went directly into it. Now, that's those two trade associations. I've got two other side gigs that I do, and they came along later.
And what are those?
One of those is being an expert witness. And again, you can tell that I probably don't have a old self-esteem problem. In fact, I was wearing a T-shirt yesterday my two daughters gave me that said, "I may be wrong, but it's highly unlikely." So imagine
Funny.
that I've got a bit of an ego issue there. And so I had done some testifying for our company in litigation lawsuits over the years, and had done a pretty good job of being able to convey to a jury in plain English what some highly technical things actually meant in terms of dollars and cents and right and wrong. And one of the law firms that we had used in a huge lawsuit, tens of millions of dollars that worked out successfully for the company, had a similar lawsuit out west at another similar facility. And they called me up and said, "Would you like to be an expert witness? We really like the way you testified for your company." And so for the last year, a little over a year, I have worked with them on that case.
And that's a good gig. My husband is an expert witness.
Yeah, it's highly paid, and it's very mentally challenging.
That's what he says. Yeah, it's very mentally challenging for him as well. So for people who have an expertise in an area, that's a great gig.
It is. It's kind of hard to get. You've got to be a professional engineer, and I'm a chemical engineer, and there aren't very many of us that get the professional license. And you've got to have a little bit of a personality, and as you know, and as my sweet wife knows, engineers are not always blessed with the most friendly and most warm and fuzzy personalities. But you do have to be able to relate to the jury, and they have to find you believable.
Absolutely. So that's a good gig. Now, you said you had another gig. What is that?
That one is contract lobby. During my career, we didn't have a lobbyist for our company, and so I volunteered to do that. And spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. I actually testified before both House and Senate subcommittees. I've got a bunch of YouTube film of me being hammered by angry senators and representatives since I was representing an oil company, and that's never fun. But I actually love doing that. It was again, a big challenge.
Wow.
And also did that on the state level. And so now if somebody has a piece of legislation that they think has merit, and if I agree with them and it doesn't conflict with any of my other clients, then I will take on the challenge of trying to convince legislators that this is something that they need to do.
That's great. Well, I am so glad that you were able to parlay your career into 4 mini careers, basically. So that's what you did. Now, let me ask you another question. You retired. Now, you basically retired and then went straight into working for yourself. But did you still experience any of that depression or loss of identity that some people feel especially when they have high-powered jobs like yours, that they feel, or did moving into those 4 mini jobs alleviate that?
I really expected to. I was certain I would, but I have not experienced any of that. I've never and I used to like going into work, but I've never one time have gotten up in the morning and thought, gosh, I wish I could go to the plant. It just hasn't happened. I think the side gigs have a high concentration of the kinds of things I like the best, and and a very low concentration of the things I like the least about my old job. So I think they meet that need. So
that is one thing that I've been recommending, is that you figure out what you want to do before you retire. And it sounds like you did that. So it sounds like it works, based on what you're doing. So we are going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and find out more about what Steve Cousins has been doing since he retired from a high-powered position, and how he is changed his life and is doing what he wants to do now, not sitting around, but also hasn't had any depression or anything that comes along with that, a high-powered person retiring. So we'll be right back after this break. Do you want to join in the conversation? Have a question that you need help with? Join our Facebook group. It's free and we have fun in there, along with supporting each other. Just go to rockyourretirement.com/community and apply to be a member. Welcome back to the Rock Your Retirement Show. I'm here with Steve Cousins, and he is a fairly recent retiree at this taping about 1.5 years ago. And he's been telling us how he was able to parlay his work experience into 4 mini jobs that allows him to stay mentally active, but still do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. So, Steve, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of fun being here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. So, not everybody can take their job and turn it into a lobbying position, or some of the jobs that you have are still what I would consider to be high-powered types of jobs. Do you have plans for when you start to slow down and you maybe physically or mentally can't keep up with these 4 side gigs?
Not specifically. I particularly picked these areas because I have seen other people do these jobs part-time well up into their 80s because they're not physically taxing. And while they're mentally challenging, they're not of the same complexity that the old chemical engineering design work I used to do. So they're more relationship based and network based. And so I think I can continue to do these, up until the point where maybe ill health or something would step into the way.
Okay, so these jobs were all based on the relationships that you built along the, along the years. Do you have any advice for the listener who maybe hasn't done what you did and they're kind of starting over? They don't really have the relationships. Maybe they've moved to a new area of the country. Anything that you can think of that would give them a starting point? Because you've obviously built up really great relationships over your career.
Well, if they're in financial condition, I know this show's not about money, but if they're in a point where they don't need to earn money, and I don't need to earn any money, I just kind of like to, but that's not a big value for them, and it's not for most people that are financially independent. I would probably focus on non-paid volunteer side gigs. I've got many more of those than I do of the paid gigs. I've got 7 right now that are side gigs that are non-paid.
It sounds like you're busier now than you were when you were working, maybe, with 7 volunteer jobs and 4 side gigs. Tell me about your volunteer work.
Well, I chair the board of trustees for our local community college. And that was 2 hours Monday, and it'll be all day Friday. We've got a retreat. So that's appointed by the governor. So it kind of ties into my career, but it's you're responsible for the entire college, and it's $14 million budget, and hiring the president, and, approving the contracts, and so it really makes a difference because I can just tell you a quick story about one of the students that came through there. Her name was Maria. She came into this country illegally, speaking no English at 16. She was starving to death in Mexico. She ended up a few years later, had a bad marriage, an abusive spouse, got divorced, ended up in our small town as a maid. And the lady she was working for just drug her down to the college and made her get her GED. And she got it, and she found out going through the class she was very bright when she had enough to eat. She just was starving in Mexico. She saw some of the students there that were getting their licensed practical nursing credentials. She said, I can do that. And she got her LPN. Then she got her RN, and she got her Bachelor's of Science in RN. Then she got her PhD in nurse practitioning. And she is just doing great. And this is somebody making minimum wage with a green card. And now she is a very highly paid professional doctor, basically.
That is awesome. I bet that her original employer is probably so proud of the change that she was able to make with Maria. So now if somebody can't be the trustee of a college, are there other volunteer opportunities for just rank and file type employees that or retired employees where they could go volunteer to college?
There are plenty of opportunities for that. I also am on a local foundation. I volunteer on a steering committee for a low-income hospital clinic that helps people that either are underinsured or not insured or are out of work, and has full medical and dental care.
That is awesome.
That's huge for people, that they don't have to go to the emergency room in our town. They can come to our clinic and get treated. And we're staffed half by volunteers there.
That is so important. People don't realize that funding and volunteering at the local clinics can make such a big difference in your community. I used to be on the board, actually the fundraising board of a local clinic where I live. I did that for several years. And, regardless of what political affiliation you have, just think about it this way. If the person in the restaurant that you go to doesn't have medical care, then you're more at risk of being sick yourself because you're eating at a restaurant while somebody is sick. So having the medical care is important, not just to the person getting the care, but to all of us, the entire community. So kudos on doing that. And there's plenty of volunteer opportunities at those clinics, whether it's stuffing envelopes when they're doing a campaign or whatever. So I agree with you. Get involved in those type of activities. So you said there were 7 you've covered too. What else do you do?
Let's see. I'm active at the state and the local chamber of commerce. So now that I'm a private, self-employed businessman, and that helps with networking. But you get to work on economic development projects and support some of the same legislation. A lot of these things tie together with what I do for paid work too. Absolutely. I also work with university, our state university that I got my chemical engineering degree from. I was not one of their better students at the time. I was pretty lazy, and they're amazed that I succeeded at anything. Some of the same professors are still there, but they love me now and my help, because I'm on the advisory board for the department and on another advisory group. We mentor students. We help them learn how to interview for jobs.
That's
we
awesome.
Advise the curriculum, and we fund special projects for individual professors to help them out with their teaching.
That's great.
It is fun, and it keeps you in touch with the young people. A network can get stale if you're not adding to it all the time. A lot of the people that were my mentors are long since retired, and many have long since passed. And so now my network, I'm adding millennials and Generation Xers to it.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because as we interact with the different generations, we realize that there are some differences, obviously, between the generations, but there's also a lot of commonalities. And so I'm glad that you're reaching out to the other generations, because it's so important that we learn about each other and get along, because we have to pass the baton down to them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I've always enjoyed people younger than myself, the energy and, the new ideas. Now, the one thing I've left out completely, which is really the most important part of my life, is my relationship with my spouse, because it sounds like all I do is work and volunteer, but most weeks I can pack all that into about half a week, and the other half is spent mostly with her. We very active. We're both distance runners. We both play competitive tennis on teams and tournaments, and we extreme hike, and we off-road ride in an over horsepowered buggy. We fish together. We ski together. We search out hidden waterfalls. And we travel just about everywhere. We've been doing that for about 39 years now and counting. So
that's great. Yeah. It's kind of sad that so many marriages wind up in divorce after retirement because people don't know what to do with each other. They were working 80 hours a week, and the wife goes in one direction, the husband goes in another, and then when they're all of a sudden together all the time, they don't, the relationship has changed. So I'm so glad that you didn't fall into that trap with your own wife.
I think the side gigs and the volunteer work helps because I'm not sure anyone could stand me for, 120 hours a week. But we spend a lot more time together than we did in the past. And, just things like cooking together now that I never had time to do. We do that blue apron thing, and, even somebody inept like me can feel like he's half a chef. So
That's great. Did you have any conversations when you were planning your retirement? Did you talk with your wife about what you were physically going to be doing, or were you like most retirees where you just kind of winged it?
Well, I talked to her. I mean, had she been uncomfortable with me leaving full-time employment and had preferred for me to just go to a different job at a different company, then I would have had to seriously consider that. And probably that's what I would have done. She said, look, we've got enough money and just need to do what you want to do. And I talked over the side gigs things with her, and she thought, that sounds like you. So she gave me a lot of good counsel. She knows me probably better than I know myself. So. Well,
you've been married for 39 years, so it sounds like you kind of grew up together.
Well, we did. And even, I maybe overplan things. Even before we got married, I made sure she knew how to play tennis, she knew how to fish, all the things that we still do. Because I thought, we're going to be together forever. We need to have some common hobbies. And she loves all that. So the only problem is she can outrun me now.
Uh-oh.
I used to be faster than her, but now I'm struggling to keep up.
The student surpasses the teacher. So that happens. Okay, so we had gotten through 4 of your volunteer activities through the university, and then what are the other, 3? Yeah, you said you had.
Well, there were 2 chamber ones, local and the state. I was counting those as 2. There's also a group called 50 for the Future, which is a local group where people donate their own money to do projects for the city that would benefit the community, but things the city or the county can't really afford to fund. And so I'm also in that group and on that board. And we can do things like studies to figure out how to solve problems in the city or improve things. And that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, it sounds like all of your volunteer and all of your side gigs, they all come together like a spider's web. They're all interconnected.
They do. And I think the advice I'd have for people in their careers, if they're still working, is to don't just do your job. Don't just do that one thing that is your prime center, but, get outside of your comfort zone. I was terrified of public speaking in junior high school and high school. But once I stepped outside of the boundaries and faced it, I acted and I did TV shows and I, have spoken before thousands of people, and I just eat it up now. It's so much fun. But that guy, if he hadn't stepped out of his comfort zone, would have never made it through this podcast. I was so shocked.
So just by stepping out and starting, what did you start with? The public speaking or the acting? Or
Yeah, I volunteered. Well, I volunteered. What I started on at work was I volunteered to represent the company at the Rotary Club. I volunteered to lead elementary school tours through the plant, or to go on career day. Just anytime there was any opportunity to practice speaking and to meet people, to be on any kind of local civic committee, some kind of a emergency fire department thing connected to our plant, or whatever. I just volunteered for everything, and I got to know people, and yeah, it was a little extra work, but it made work more fun too, because I didn't just have to do the same thing every day. I had a really varied career.
Right, and it gave you opportunities after your career was over to do what you're doing now.
Because just a chemical engineer, once he retires, there's not many people in our town that are going to hire a chemical engineer for chemical engineering. It's just a little too arcane.
Exactly.
the expert witness thing's an exception, but even that, I'm not really on the stand as an engineer as much as I am as a guy that understands how businesses work. You can explain to the jury.
And you think your public speaking helped you with that as well?
Oh, it did. Being able to communicate with the group and read the audience. The jury is just a group of 11 or 12 people listening to public speaking, and you've got to know if you're being effective or if they're turning you off.
Did you ever join Toastmasters to help perfect some of your speaking skills?
No, I did Dale Carnegie instead.
Oh, okay.
It's similar. My dad had given me that Dale Carnegie Win Friends and Influence People book in junior high, and I loved it then. And that's when I started breaking out of my shell. So I realized you don't have to be born with that gregarious, outward reaching. You just have to learn the processes and follow them, and everybody will think you are outgoing.
You can actually do that at any age. Some of the things that is going around the sort of the circles that I hang out in are people are going to improv classes, and that's helping their interpersonal relationships and their public speaking, just going to these classes where they teach you how to do improv. Are they doing that where you live as well?
It's a pretty small town. They don't have that right now, but I have read that and seen that, and I think that would be a lot of fun because I hate to say I'm funny, but I have always been able to make up appropriate comments.
You're quick on your feet. You're fast on your feet, quick on your feet, or whatever.
And I had a good sense of humor. I find everything funny in life almost. And so I think that would be pretty good, and maybe would develop some skills a little different than Toastmasters or Carnegie.
Right.
But that's all good. All that's really good. And the people I met in that Dale Carnegie course 35 years ago, some of them are still very good friends. So.
Well, I have to tell you, when my husband and I first got married, you probably know this if you listen, we joined a couple of meetup groups, and that's where we found some of our friends. Well, in one of the groups that we joined, which was not for couples, it was for, just everybody could join. There was a gentleman in that group, and he was kind of shy and he was overweight, and he started taking improv, and I followed him on Facebook, and he started losing weight. He's probably lost 40 or 50 pounds, and now he smiles all the time. He has this, social life that probably is revolving around the improv. I mean, it has completely changed his life. So learning how to publicly speak, taking the Dale Carnegie, taking Toastmasters, taking an improv class, you're never too old. I mean, you can take these things at any time. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
And everybody, I think, has that in them, that ability to be just way better and to feel much better about themselves than they do. And, the sad thing is some people get pushed out of their comfort zone, or a friend reaches in and helps pull them out, and they blossom. They become just exceptional people, like most of your guests, maybe not this one, but other people, I think, stay trapped in that shell their whole lives, and it's really a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. So we are actually coming up to the end of our time. If there was one piece of advice that you would give to your fellow listeners, what would that be? Well,
it's too late for most people. I would say marry someone better than yourself and invest a lot of time in that relationship, because really, if everything else went away and we still had each other, we'd be fine.
Oh, that is that's touching. I love the fact that you said that. And you were about to say something else and I interrupted you. So what else were you going to say?
From the other standpoint, I'd say widen your horizons. And I would have never figured out that I even liked to do things like lobbying or witnessing at trials. I hadn't volunteered to be the one to try it. And some of the things I volunteered for, no doubt I didn't enjoy, and I stopped doing them. But all the things I'm doing now, none of them were part of my core job. They're just things I found by accident and realized I like that. I'm pretty good at that. And I think people will constantly be reaching outside of their small world to the bigger world, that no matter what they are, that if they're a carpenter, a truck driver, they're still going to find things that they're good at. Maybe teaching a Sunday school class, who knows what it might be. But they're going to be things they can do after they retire that will give meaning to their life and variety to their life.
I love it. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the Rock Your Retirement Show. We really, really appreciate it. And for my listener, we'll see you next time on Rock Your Retirement. Bye.